Kombucha tea, what it does is literally pull out environmental and metabolic toxins.
Much like some of the youths from the inner city who find a niche in gangs, these people find a niche in the dark world of Satanism.
When my parents would wake me from a night terror, they would tell me that, I've been running around the house screaming.
From the boundaries of the universe to the depth of your soul, embark on a journey through the unknown and unexplained. Hello and welcome. This is Patrick McNee. Today, we'll delve into the dark side of sleep. And then we'll shed some light on those Pied Pipers who misuse the power of music. But in our first story, we'll witness some remarkable claims of people in search of much-needed cures.
Bottom of my foot just went numb, and I didn't understand why. And I lost the hearing in my left ear. My handwriting was affected terribly. I have problems viewing with my left eye, focusing with my left eye.
Multiple sclerosis, a disease that can strike at any time and choose anyone.
I used to have symptoms every day with a multiple sclerosis, and you would just wonder in the back of your mind how much worse can it get? Where am I going to end up?
Over lunch one day, a friend introduced Loopy to a tea with the bizarre name.
She had been drinking the Kombucha tea already for about 6 months, and she knew I had multiple sclerosis, and she showed me an article about it and how it cured multiple sclerosis and many other diseases. And I told her at that point, I'm ready to try anything.
In our desperate search for the ultimate cure, is it possible that we found the answer simply in a tea brewed from a living culture of yeast and bacteria?
Handwriting went back to normal, and I write really quick. The vision in my left eye has gotten a lot better. I can now run a couple of blocks where before I used to trip over my foot. I can stand on my feet for longer periods of time.
I've been drinking the kombucha tea about 3 months. I experienced a positive effect pretty immediately. The under eye skin seems to have diminished where I don't have the wrinkles and the lines and the bag and the color.
It's a miracle. It's a real small miracle, and you don't know what this little mushroom contains, but there's a miracle in that mushroom.
Kombucha is not a modern-day discovery. In fact, this mushroom has a history stretching back thousands of years.
We can trace it back to the Xin dynasty in China, where they called it the divine tea or Lang Shui, and said that it gave its drinkers immortality.
In severe winters, under horrible conditions, it is known that Russian troops not only survived, but thrived as a result of drinking the kombucha tea.
America's behind, okay? We can thank the Russians for having done an enormous amount of research on the kombucha.
But kombucha is not a mushroom you stumble across in a field. You can find the mushroom from a professional grower or even a friend. Every 7 to 10 days, the mother mushroom will have a baby. Add a few tea bags and sugar in a bowl, and you have yourself a beverage with a divine twist. But what secret does this strangely flavored tea with the bizarre name hold?
Kombucha tea, which is filled with B vitamins and folic acid and a wonderful thing called glucuronic acid, which exists in the human and animal body. And what it does in the human and animal body is literally pull out environmental and metabolic toxins and remove them from your body.
People don't always drink the tea searching for the miracle cure.
I play piano for groups of people, and I've had arthritis in my fingers for a number of years. But I noticed after a while, after I've been drinking the tea, that there is absolutely no soreness, arthritis, no stiffness in joints, no pain or swelling. Any kind of symptoms of that whatsoever completely disappeared.
My acne that I'd had since I was 13 disappeared. I began to lose the first of the 15 pounds I had put on since high school. Then I started to give it to my neighbors, who are mainly older people. they started to come down to me, down to the house, and say, my arthritis is gone. My diabetes is under control again. My psoriasis is gone. I'm going to go dancing for the first time in 30 years.
Betsy took the tea over to AIDS Project LA, an alternative healing group for AIDS sufferers.
People put on their weight again. Their diarrhea went away. Folliculitis disappeared. T cells went up sometimes by 150 points, which is unheard of. All kinds of miracles happened for them.
And one thing about kombucha, which is really important for people to understand, it does not cure cancer. It does not cure anything else. It helps your body to heal itself and to deal with these problems. Most doctors, when they first hear about it, are reasonably skeptical.
But the increasing number of remarkable stories surrounding the kombucha couldn't be ignored.
I had had wrist surgery, and I had had a knee problem after that, and I had been on pain pills for 5 years, and I was, I felt mentally retarded. I wasn't really, but I was just sluggish all the time and didn't have any energy nor ambition to do anything.
Doctors are now becoming more willing to let their patients use these things, use kombucha as well as other alternative treatments in combination with traditional medicine so that they can work together to get the best results.
I started drinking the kombucha tea about 6 months ago. I didn't think it was going to do anything. I just did it as a favor to a friend. I've done more in the last 6 months as far as away from the house is concerned. I don't know even how to compare it, like 20 years ago, really.
But the one secret to the kombucha mushroom lies in the recipe.
It's important that you make the kombucha tea correctly, because when it's made correctly, it's very good for you.
I would describe the tea to a friend as being a revitalizing, a youthening, energizing, balancing elixir, miracle little mushroomy fungus mold thing.
Anything that's going to cost me almost no money at all, very little effort, easy to make, and going to cause fantastic changes in my health, yes, that's a wonder. Yeah, that's a miracle. Sure.
It's an overall emotional, mental, physical improvement. I think it's a magic thing that came to the United States.
Everybody should try it because it seems to know what's wrong with you, and that's where it goes. I don't know, it's a mystery all its own, but I love it.
Much like some of the youths from the inner city who find a niche in gangs, these people find a niche in the dark world of Satanism.
Music is said to be a gift from God. But there are those who abuse this gift and use the notes and lyrics as a musical lure to promote evil. Recent studies reveal that music has a profound and magnetic influence on its listeners. And what do we hear? Well, let's listen.
Rock music, a staple in the world's music diet since the 50s. Many called the new sound devil music. For the most part, people just tuned in their radios and bought the records. Then more and more reports of rock groups who secretly worship Satan started surfacing. Backmasking lyrics, pacts made with the devil. We heard of terrible tragedies befalling the participants of these rituals and their young listeners.
But that was the past. Today, many rock bands openly use Satan to sell their music. Whether these people actually believe what they're selling is still up in the air.
Just go into any music store and see for yourself all the satanic symbolism and themes saturating the shelves. An industry insider who chose to stay anonymous because of professional reasons gave us a little insight into the dark world of the so-called Satan music.
Yeah, there's a lot of imagery and satanic or black themes in music today. I don't know whether Satan's the one behind it. I look for these kind of bands because I make a lot of cash. Some say that the dollar is Satan. Oh well, yeah, if you look at it that way, Satan's running the whole music industry.
We've all heard of backmasking, but not many of us have actually heard it. don't know what was said, but it sure sounds like it's from hell. Let's listen to it backwards.
I'm gonna burn your soul, crush your bones. I'm gonna make you bleed. You're gonna bleed for me.
What most people know about Satan and Satan worshiping is minimal. But we found a whole new world that most of us didn't even know existed.
The most prominent Satanist in the world is Anton Szandor LaVey, author of the Satanic Bible, or better known by his followers as the Black Pope. After writing the Satanic Bible, he went on to start the Church of Satan in 1966. It seems Mr. LaVey admits to a penchant for blondes. Two famous blondes reportedly associated with LaVey before each of their untimely deaths were Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield. The Satanic Bible is a dictionary and ritual guide for the initiated and uninitiated alike. It lists the supposed 9 satanic statements and gives step-by-step instructions for various rituals. There are an estimated 100,000 Satanists in the United States at this time. Satanists perform various rituals to cement their relationship with Satan. There are many reports that human sacrifice is involved in many of these ceremonies. On a tip, we drove to 6666 Hollywood Boulevard, Hell House, an establishment dedicated to the macabre and evil things in general. They wouldn't let us film inside. We must caution those who are easily shocked to think twice before entering. For those who are interested, there are many books out that teach parents on how to spot this evil influence in their children. Certain signs to look for are the paraphernalia associated with the black arts. Pentagrams, skulls, goat heads, and hand signs like the horned hand. We found that the majority of people in the black arts were white, from affluent families, and very angry. Much like some of the youths from the inner city who find a niche in gangs, these people find a niche in the dark world of Satanism. They in turn spread more hate and violence through their music. Spreading messages of hate and violence is certainly not new. Adolf Hitler took control of the film and music industry of Germany in the 30s. The results were horrendous. While no one since has been as effective as the Third Reich, many think that certain large companies are being controlled by Satanists bent on destroying young minds just to sell their products.
M-O-N-E-Y. That's what it's about. Money. I don't care who knows. But I've heard rumors of certain individuals who believe this stuff. I've never personally seen it. I think it's just money.
There are numerous groups that claim other businesses are in league with Satan. Not all these claims are substantiated. They were passing this out on the corner. It claims that Procter & Gamble's president went on the Donahue Show to reveal his link with the Satanic Church. The Donahue Show vehemently denies this ever happened. The underworld is a dark place, run by greed, hate, and misguided ambition. It's a world that, though some may choose, others will want to run from.
I'm no Satanist, but if I were, I'd be in this business too. Let's face it, Satan sells.
When my parents would awake me from a night terror, they would tell me that, I've been running around the house screaming.
The reality of our waking hours can sometimes be quite unnerving. But even more frightening is the unreality of our dreams and nightmares, when our subconscious is unleashed. What do these visions mean? And how do they affect our daily lives? When dusk relinquishes its last light, the darkness of night settles in. Most of us embrace the late hours as a time for winding down, resting our bodies as well as our minds. So we prepare for a good night's sleep. But what do we really know about this diverse and mysterious state that each of us spends a third of our lives in? Many myths and superstitions lie within this veil of darkness, but for each child's made-up monsters under the bed, there does exist a myriad of truths just as terrifying.
I was asleep one night and I woke up and I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was glued to the bed. I couldn't move. My whole body was paralyzed. All I could move were my eyes, so I was terrifyingly, frantically searching the room with my eyes. And in the corner, I saw this thing.
One such terror is from a Scandinavian belief and involves a mysterious sleeping hag.
It looked like an old woman. It was all dressed in black and it had a veil over its face, but these eyes were piercing through it. It was horrifying. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream, I couldn't do anything. It started gliding over towards the bed and it stopped right by the bed, and all I could do was close my eyes. What else could I do? When I opened it, it was gone. And all of a sudden I could move, the weight was gone, and oh, it was terrifying. I've never experienced anything so horrible in my life.
Imagine laying down to bed and waking up in the middle of an intersection miles away from home, and you're still wearing your night clothes. A bad dream? Hardly. More like a classic case of sleepwalking. These cases can range from the bizarre to the oddly subdued.
In sleepwalking, the transition between sleep state and awake state is not negotiated just right. They sort of get stuck in between. They're not quite asleep and they're not quite awake. Usually their friends and relatives tell them that you did something last night that was weird. If you wake up in the morning from your bed and you see half-eaten banana next to you and some chocolate and maybe, some ham, and you don't remember doing any of this, and you know that you were alone last night, you have two possibilities. Either somebody came in and deliberately trying to set you up, or you did it yourself.
While sleepwalking can be frightening, it doesn't often possess the violence of night terrors.
My night terrors would be so horrifying that, I would have to be shaken awake, like coming out of a deep hypnosis. My mother would use cold rags and just repeat almost like a mantra, you must wake up, you must wake up.
Well, we had a case of a teenager a few years ago who would have these night terrors or sleep terrors and become profoundly agitated, and his parents were unable to control him. And on one incident, he jumped off a second-floor landing, falling through a glass table down below and severely cutting his neck, not enough to bleed to death. And then he proceeded to run around the house, spreading blood around the house until the parent was able to tackle him.
When my parents would awake me from a night terror, they would tell me that, I've been running around the house screaming. They would tell me that it was a night terror, so that eventually when I got used to being awakened from them, that was also a focal point, all right? I can associate this bad feeling with the term night terror. And now, even today, 10, 12 years later, I still am scared. I still get feelings of fear thinking about it.
If someone is awakened from a nightmare, they will tend to remember dream content, whereas if they're awakened from a sleep terror, if you're able to do that, sometimes it's difficult, they will not really remember much dream content.
Parasomnia is the collective term for disruptive sleep disorders, some of which are so severe, victims can actually stop breathing several times in a night. With cases ranging from annoying to life-threatening, help is available. By monitoring patients in sleep centers throughout the country, clinical evaluations probe this mysterious enigma.
Well, the brain itself is a very mysterious organ, and it probably less is known about the brain than any other area.
Jim Romanovich helps us see firsthand how the process works.
What we do, we check out for sleep disorders, mainly respiratory.
The electrodes being applied will monitor Jim's vital signs, essential in understanding the patient's sleep rhythms. As Jim is entering the first stage of sleep, the polygraphs begin running, These markings will then indicate how a patient is being affected while asleep. Whether our inner fears come alive or nature has tricks of the night, the realm of our non-waking hours can be a continuous nightmare.
So we still need to know quite a bit. We still don't understand all the mechanisms of what happens to people when they sleep.
That's our show. Thanks for watching. One final thought. No matter how much information we obtain or facts we are given, each of us must filter this knowledge for ourselves, then decide what to believe.
My experience was completely different than anything I'd ever heard about. I had a concept of hell, but this was nothing like what I was anticipating at all.
After death, most souls move on to find their final resting place. But what causes some spirits to uproot and continue to linger on this earth?
From the boundaries of the universe to the depth of your soul, embark on a journey through the unknown and unexplained. During a near-death experience, in the act of dying, people claim to journey to the other side where it's incredibly peaceful and serene. But not everyone who returns from the edge of death comes back with these feelings. There are those whose life after death encounters were full of darkness and torment. What they saw and lived to tell about was a glimpse of eternal damnation.
Richard, keep my wedding rings and tell Alex and Jacob how much I loved them, and that this is not their fault. I can't do this anymore. I love you. Please understand. I just can't do this anymore.
Suicide, the final act of those who feel life's problems are so overwhelming that the only way they can cope is by ceasing to cope entirely. Angie Fenimore was such a person. But during her suicide attempt, Angie discovered the turmoil she was facing in this life was nothing compared to that which awaited her in the afterlife.
Hell is a matter of suffering, and I was in hell long before I took my life. Where I went was just a manifestation of what I was already experiencing. I wanted so badly just to end my life and to be done. And what I found was that I took all that with me, and it was multiplied, just intensified beyond anything that we even have the power of understanding in this life. And so it was absolutely the worst thing I could do. There was no escape.
Angie was the product of a dysfunctional home. Her mother left early on, and Angie assumed the responsibility of taking care of her younger sister and her father, an alcoholic. The young girl carried out her new role as best she could, but the situation began to deteriorate, and eventually Angie became a victim of psychological abuse, sexual abuse, and was consumed with feelings of utter worthlessness. At 19, Angie attempted to neutralize her ongoing mental anguish by getting married and having children. But she soon realized that having a family of her own would not free her from her secret misery.
I had fought depression for years and feelings of self-loathing that went along with how I'd been raised, and I felt like I was a horrible mother. I felt like I was dooming my children to a horrible existence, and I felt like I was actually going to be doing my family a favor by leaving them.
Initially, Angie thought death would take her to a better place, an idea which had been confirmed by her stepmother.
She had gone up to the corner of the room and seen her body when she had suffered a car accident. She had talked about being embraced by love and warmth and peace and not wanting to return back to her body.
But such a tranquil transition would not be the case for Angie.
My experience was completely different than anything I'd ever heard about. I had a concept of hell, but this was nothing like what I was anticipating at all.
Traditionally, hell has been thought of as the final destination for unrepentant sinners and evildoers. Images of lost souls suffering an existence of eternal torment in a pit of fire are familiar. But Angie's experience of the netherworld was not one of physical suffering. Instead, she found hell to be a place of unrelenting emotional distress. Angie's journey into the abyss began one cold January morning when, after failing to end her life by slashing her wrists, she took an overdose of pills and laid down on a couch to die. Angie, too, might have been doomed to this ironic existence for all eternity had she not been called upon.
When I was dying, I could feel this tremendous energy encompass me, and I could feel my spirit and my body separating. And it was very powerful and far more real than anything I've experienced in this life.
As her spirit left her body, Angie became aware of images racing toward her.
What I saw was actually my very first memory, and that was of being born. And I saw my mother looking at me and cradling me, and then I went through every moment of my life just exactly as I had lived it, only I felt everybody's feelings. I felt it from everybody's perspective, and I had a completely renewed understanding of what my life had been like and what my parents had really been like and what they were trying to do. And I found it very interesting that my mother was such a significant part of my life. I'd forgotten most of my memories with her because she had left when I was 9. And most importantly, I think I understood that she loved me.
As Angie continued to look back on her life, she began to sense that she wasn't alone.
I could feel a presence with me. I could feel a person with me. I knew he was male, and I knew he was viewing my life with me.
Eventually, Angie's review of her life ended as it began, with her suicide.
I went all the way to the point where I was lying there on the couch, and at that point I was surrounded by darkness.
Angie then felt herself descending into another plane of existence where she became aware of other disembodied spirits who had chosen the path of self-destruction.
They were all kind of mumbling to themselves, completely self-absorbed, caring nothing about anybody else there or about anything but themselves. What was going on was that these people were reliving this worst experience over and over and over again, reliving this agony that they were in, this turmoil, whatever it was that had caused each of them to take their lives.
Angie, too, might have been doomed to this ironic existence for all eternity had she not been called upon.
I heard a voice, and it said, "Is this what you really want?" And I looked to see where the voice was coming from.
The words had come from above.
I could see a pinpoint of light that looked just like a little star, and it grew in intensity and came toward me very quickly.
But the light wasn't a star. It was a being who was made of light.
And as he approached, I realized that this was God. I didn't have to be told. It was like the universe reverberated his name. And then he said, "You can't take your life. It's not yours to take. And life is supposed to be hard. You have to pass through these things. All of us have done this." And I was filled, as he spoke to me, with understanding about the purpose of life and what we're doing here and how important it is to think about how you treat other people. And then I felt another presence standing next to him. And I realized it was the same being that had been next to me during my life review.
Though Angie could not see this second presence, she sensed an inexplicable connection with him.
I could feel this incredible love and peace and compassion coming from him, and pain as well. And I knew that this was for what I had done. And then I heard him say, and I still couldn't see him, but I heard him say, "Don't you understand? I've done this for you." And when he said those words, I understood that I was in the presence of the Savior of the world. And I could feel what he had done for me. I was taken into that experience, into when he suffered for me. And I caught that moment of his life and understood that this was a very real and literal thing that had happened. And then I was shown what would happen to my children if I were to take my life and remain dead. And my oldest son in particular was harmed so terribly by the grief and the pain that he would have to suffer through his life that he was rendered incapable of even completing his mission here successfully.
With the knowledge of the potential fate of her children, Angie's desire to die disappeared.
And it was at that point that I was ready to come back. I think I just needed to understand that my life is not my own, that what we're doing here is so important, and every life that we touch is important.
Angie's return to her body was instantaneous.
When I came back, I rushed very quickly through the darkness, and when I opened my eyes, I was lying on the couch, and I could feel that I could feel all the pain that I'd experienced, the drugs that I had taken, and my husband was coming through the front door at the same time.
Looking back on the incident, Angie now realizes how she came to a place where she felt the need to kill herself.
I didn't get there because other people had done things to me as much as that I had chosen not to overcome the things that are intentionally given to us, problems, things that we need to overcome so that we can grow. I still have trials that I have to overcome, but the important thing is to find happiness and to actually make happiness.
Recently, Angie gave birth to her third child, David, and the happiness which his presence has brought to her is evident.
I've often wondered how come I was permitted to come back, and all I can really say about that is that I am filled with gratitude that I was. I don't know for sure. All I know is that I still had purpose here, and that I was important, especially to my children.
In her book, Beyond the Darkness, Angie chronicles her most amazing journey and details the information she was given about a scheme to land us all in hell.
One of the things that I was told is that there is a being of darkness, that he's very organized, and that he has concourses of dark angels that assist him, and their main purpose is to thwart the plan of God, to direct those of us who are here in mortality to do harmful things.
But because of Angie's harrowing experience, she knows she can avoid the plans of the Prince of Darkness by living her life in the light. And by doing so, her life has improved immeasurably.
Yeah, life is great, and being in the light is wonderful.
After death, most souls move on to find their final resting place. But what causes some spirits to uproot and continue to linger on this earth?
Have you ever felt something or someone was in the room with you, even though you knew you were alone? Or had an object disappear and reappear in the same place? Strange occurrences can often be explainable quirks, but as some believe, there may be spirits that have made themselves right at home, in your home. How can you find out?
Famous haunts have long been a fascination for the ghost hunter. The Queen Mary, the Tower of London, Abraham Lincoln in the White House, and in recent years, the Amityville Horror, all have gained worldwide attention for harboring the most diverse of spirits. One of the most notorious cases of spirit investigation is the John case in Los Angeles. Strange things occurred in and around the house. While trying to find the source of these supernatural oddities, something completely unexpected happened.
It started out where they were taking Polaroid pictures, and by accident, one of them asked a question. And when the Polaroid picture was developed, there was an answer there.
In fact, every picture taken showed some sign of ghostly intervention. After death, most souls move on to find their final resting place. But what causes some spirits to uproot and continue to linger on this earth?
I think that there are a lot of spirits that hover around us and hover around the earth. A lot of them are lost. They're earthbound. They can't figure out how to go ahead and go on in their existence.
Last year, a team of psychic investigators were called to a Los Angeles home, reported to be experiencing some rather strange phenomenon. The residents believed they were not alone. Was something lingering within these walls?
They can appear any way that they want to. They can appear as the last did in their physical life, or they can appear as a cloud. It's up to the spirit, individual. We tell them who is there and why they're there.
There's been a murder in this building somewhere. Someone was murdered here, a woman was murdered here.
Did you guys check out that front bathroom? I picked up a heart attack in there and I couldn't breathe.
This place, this is an interesting place.
The thought form that it was created here is of angry fights, arguments, and etc. And it will affect you. It will affect anybody who's in this room.
There is a female spirit. There's a sense of a female being here.
And you can see them standing there, or if you're watching TV and you see the movement out of your eye. You turn, and it isn't there, but it is.
While some spirits remain locked in their tragedies, there are others who linger on for protection.
I keep picking up a older man. He's bald-headed and he has gray around his head. I feel he's lived here for a while, quite a while.
The investigator describes an entity that she believes is the grandfather of one of the residents.
He's with the piece of furniture, and I feel myself that he is an overlooking his granddaughter at this time.
The occupants have since moved out, but is it possible the spirits followed him? Well, each investigator has their own unique method of finding out.
What I look for basically is electricity. Then I know I've got something of a spiritual type of energy force. I use clairsentience, clairaudio. Sometimes they look at an object, get a sense of what was connected with that object.
My particular specialty is sensing changes in energy density. Especially if it's a mirror that leads to an outside wall, it could be a portal from which spirits come and go.
I saw them. When I walked through the door, I saw them. As I walk in the door, turn on my natural clairvoyancy and see who's there.
The lady who was in the other condo, now she didn't come. I think she stayed with the other apartment.
But one spirit was not to be missed, something all too familiar to the team and those who live at the residence.
Did you guys pick up on the grandfather this time?
Yeah.
Yeah, Judy saw him in the little girl's room.
Well, your grandfather, he likes the desk.
If these spirit entities are all around us, could there be a way to communicate with them?
This is one of the pieces of equipment that we usually use to record spirit voices on. At this time, we'd like to ask members of our group to ask a question and to pause about 30 seconds between questions.
Each member of the group directed a question to a spirit. We heard no immediate response, but when playing the tape back, we came across something that was literally out of this world.
I want to ask the grandfather if he wants to have the desk moved out of the bedroom because he wants to sit here in the living room and be around other people. If that's true, to say yes and rap twice.
Right there, hear it? Right before.
Just because we don't see anything doesn't always mean there's nothing there. The bond between life and death raises new questions. Who are these spirits? And in which realm do they really exist?
Have you ever settled for the easy way out, even willing to leave pieces of the puzzle on the table just to find an answer? We probably all have. But we may ultimately find we can learn more by discovering the right question. What do you think? Polly walked off into the night. By 3:40 that morning of August the 31st, she was dead.
The local boys didn't like the fact that Suki was all starry-eyed about this stranger. It took her attention away from them.
He used to impale his victims, and it was rumored that he would drink blood.
From the boundaries of the universe to the depth of your soul, embark on a journey through the unknown and unexplained. It's more than eerie to realize the cobblestones under my feet were the very pathway a madman walked while carefully stalking his victims. And today, he still remains the most gruesome and elusive killer London ever knew. Let's follow the blood-curling trail of Jack the Ripper. Dark alleys and foggy cobbled streets set the scene for one of the world's most notorious and macabre serial killings, a mystery that to date remains unsolved. 1888 marked an era of glamour and royal prosperity in England. In the city of London, the aristocrats celebrated. Queen Victoria had been reigning for 50 years. Only a few minutes away from this glittering display of prosperity lay a city of Victorian slums, where violence and poverty ruled, where prostitutes sold themselves for a penny or even a loaf of stale bread. It is here in the East End of London where the savage murder of Polly Nichols took place, the first in a series of brutal killings. 42 years old and mother of 5 children, Polly spent most of her waking hours drinking and roaming the streets. Without a husband, prostitution was a dreadful solution to poverty. Last seen leaving the frying pan, Polly walked off into the night. There, silent danger lurked in the shadows. By 3:40 that morning of August the 31st, she was dead. Her throat was slashed and she was disemboweled, the act of a psychopath. Not only was there no motive, but there was also no suspect. September the 8th marked the second bloody murder of a prostitute. The body of Annie Chapman was found in Chanbury Street. Again, the throat was slashed and the rest of the body mangled with savage determination. A bewildered police force found no clues, and panic spread in the dingy, crowded streets of the East End. An angry public demanded action, and even Queen Victoria herself pressured the police for some sort of explanation. September the 30th marked a day of horror. The bloodthirsty killer struck twice on this fateful night. At 1 a.m., Liz Stride's body was found in Berner Street. Her throat was cut, but the rest of her body untouched. It led to the belief that the killer was almost caught and fled the scene of the crime. Jack's thirst for blood was obviously not satisfied that night. A second body was found a couple of blocks away. Catherine Eddowes was silently slaughtered by the fearsome and now clearly practiced hand. This time, the killer spared her none of his sadistic intentions. The next day, October the 1st, was the day the world would first hear the name Jack the Ripper. Several suspects were arrested. On the flimsiest evidence, they would be locked away in lunatic asylums, a pathetic attempt to rid the streets of the dark assailant. No one was above suspicion. The month of October passed quietly. People began to breathe easier. Had Jack the Ripper's crazed appetite for blood and gore finally been satisfied? Sadly, not. On November the 9th, Jack would strike for the 5th and final time. At 13 Miller's Court, the savage remains of Mary Jane Kelly were discovered, a young, pretty girl who was led astray by the East End life of alcohol and prostitution. This frenzied yet clinical assault was the most brutal of them all and shocked even the most hardened criminologist. Mary Kelly was skinned and slain behind closed doors. Little remained of her body. The police never found her heart. One thing was clear. While indulging in his sordid fantasies, the killer had an uncanny knowledge of dissecting the human anatomy. Jack the Ripper had an extensive medical background. After the 5th killing, Jack the Ripper silently crept back into the shadows from where he emerged. Numerous suspects came to light, ranging from the obvious to the ridiculous. Even rumors about Prince Albert Victor surfaced. His twilight trips to the East End, indulging in bizarre sexual pleasures, were notorious. The royal family panicked. A cover-up was vital. Montague Druitt, a well-educated gentleman, but with a disturbing background, was used as a scapegoat to bury what could have been a sensational royal scandal. Druitt's knowledge of medical procedures and his suicide shortly after the last murder made him one of the prime suspects, and he still is today, along with 2 others. Aaron Kosminski, a man with an extreme hatred of women, especially prostitutes, made him a conspicuous suspect. But he was unable to make any sense in the police questioning, and he was put away in an asylum. Thomas Neal Cream, an American doctor, was hanged in 1892 for poisoning the Lambeth prostitutes. His departing words were, "I am Jack the," as the rope snapped taut. Today, the saga continues to fascinate the world. In London, a tour is given following the bloody trail of Jack the Ripper. Samantha Holland, a guide, gave us a final description of Jack.
He was between 5'6" or 5'9" tall, that he had dark hair, and that he was generally well-spoken. That was basically what people thought of him, that he wore a long frock coat, a red kerchief round his neck, and either a deerstalker cap or some other form of a smart hat.
The diary signed Yours truly, Jack the Ripper, was found in recent years, and it describes in grisly detail the murders of the prostitutes and the writer's chilling thoughts during that period. The diary was traced back to James Maybrick, a cotton merchant. In 1889, he died of arsenic poisoning by his own wife. The diary is still subject to great controversy. Theories and arguments still rage to this day as to the true identity of Jack the Ripper. Even after the last murder, people were never sure if he would strike again. In his tortured state of mind, he wrote, "How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. Good luck. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper."
The local boys didn't like the fact that Suki was all starry-eyed about this stranger. It took her attention away from them.
Sadly, after a young woman became the victim of unrequited love, she began to hold a daily vigil of hope. Even after her death, her spirit carries on the weight.
On a hill near Wickham, England, a young woman stood waiting expectantly. In the cool night near the Hellfire Caves, her patience prevailed. 2 centuries later, the young woman still lingers. Her tragic tale traces back to the 1700s, when the George and Dragon Inn was a favorite place for travelers to stop over on their way through the town. At this inn, a pretty young woman served in the pub. She was known to the locals simply as Suki.
She was very young, very attractive, very popular with the local lads.
A sophisticated young gentleman used to make regular visits to this inn. His eye caught the attractive young barmaid. It wasn't long before Suki had fallen head over heels for this charming stranger.
She imagined that she was going to be whisked away and by this young gentleman.
The local boys didn't like the fact that Suki was all starry-eyed about this stranger. It took her attention away from them.
Leave me alone, stop it, you're drunk again.
One day, Suki received a note out of the blue, saying that she must wait at the Hellfire Caves for her darling that same night. Suki was ecstatic. She believed that this was the beginning of a new life.
And he was going to marry her. She packed her things and wore a white dress and snuck up to the hill and waited for him. And the local lads then jumped out from behind a tree, and she realised that it was a joke, cruel joke that they'd played on her.
This letter, which was meant as a good-natured prank by the young locals, turned into disaster.
She'd picked up some stones and started throwing them at the lads, at which point they probably threw a few back, and one hit her on the head.
Suki was knocked out. In a frenzy, the young locals carried the unconscious girl back to her room at the George and Dragon Inn. It is here, in room number 6, where she died later that night.
And she has haunted the inn since then, and wearing white, and known as the White Lady.
Philip and his wife Cass ignored the strange happenings around the inn, until one day when their son James, then only 4 years old, told his mom about a new guest.
Mom, there's a ghost up in my room. And she goes, "Oh, don't be stupid. There's no such thing as ghosts."
James made a sketch of his visitor. Something about this drawing made his parents ponder the strange possibilities. His drawing is that of a woman, On the side of her head, he had drawn a prominent Band-Aid, the exact place where the stone had hit Suki in the head. James casually accepts the regular visits from the Lady in White.
She usually comes to see me at night, and she lives up in the attic, and sometimes when my friends come around, she hides from them.
She's really been not a scary ghost, but a mischievous ghost. A lot of household items go missing. We've had guests that have encountered her.
Well, she likes this place. She likes the attic especially, that's why she lives up there.
James' encounters with this mysterious lady don't frighten him. As a matter of fact, James has found a comforting companion in her. We'll never know why Suki cannot find peace. Surely her presence isn't disturbing or frightening to anyone. Perhaps she just can't leave the one place she had found hope and a glimpse at happiness.
He used to impale his victims, and it is rumored that he would drink blood.
In the north of England, the towering backdrop for Bram Stoker's ingenious portrayal of Count Dracula still looms over the city. Our story begins at this famous and ominous landmark. A creature veiled in darkness, a legend who drinks the blood of the living and who vanishes before the first light of day. Count Dracula, outrageously elegant and utterly dangerous. An aura of death, laced with grace and a peculiar beauty, surrounds vampires. They repulse us and at the same time draw us like moths to a flickering flame. Our first visual encounter with a vampire was in the 1922 silent film Nosferatu. Filling us with dread and pity, this vampire inspired many future filmmakers to create the ultimate Prince of Darkness. Bram Stoker's Gothic novel, Dracula, is the most famous portrait of the noble vampire. Little do we know that Count Dracula is not just a dark force born out of fear and damnation, but that he is based on the character and deeds of a legendary Romanian prince. Bram Stoker's inspiration to write Dracula is almost as mysterious as the bloodthirsty hero himself. One night in 1890, Stoker woke from a terrible dream, and it is after this dream that he felt compelled to write the novel. Stoker chose Prince Vlad Dracul, the infamous Dark Age ruler, as the model for Count Dracula's character. Prince Vlad Dracul was born in 1431. His reign was savage, cruel, and consisted of the worst crimes ever committed in the history of the world.
He used to impale his victims, and it is rumored that he would, or on occasion, he would drink blood, which would give him the power over his enemy.
The physical pleasure that pain and torture to his victims gave him, his insatiable thirst for blood and aristocratic background earned him the legendary name, Prince of Darkness.
He was considered a tyrant by many, but he was a hero to his countrymen because he defeated the Turks. Even to this day in Transylvania, Romania, he's still a hero.
After Vlad Dracul's death, the coffin with his body inside disappeared. Rumors spread that Vlad Dracul still roamed the silent and black hills of Romania, surviving all attempts to destroy him. This myth gave birth to vampires and eventually led to the fabulous Count Dracula. Being a vampire, Dracula has lived for hundreds of years. This has enabled him to build a vast fortune and considerable knowledge. Combined with his charm and great flair for dressing well, he has become a popular and seductive host to his unsuspecting guests.
I am Dracula. I bid you welcome.
One aspect of Bram Stoker's Dracula is that he is one of the sexiest creatures ever to grace the pages of a Gothic novel. A combination of immortality, half-animal qualities, and blue blood running through his veins make him a desirable, yet unmistakably lethal, playboy. Every woman Dracula seduces becomes immortal, stunningly beautiful, and everlastingly young. Almost without exception, his victims are young virgins, and with his hypnotic stare, intense whisper in the thick European accent, all thoughts of purity and virtue fly to the moon. Now, while the image of Bram Stoker's Dracula seems like a man you would take home to meet mother, he should still be regarded as a ruthless and habitual killer. Although primarily a gracious figure, it is on closer observation that you notice his anemic complexion, almost the color of death. His charming smile reveals long, sharp fangs, but it is his hands that Count Dracula's servant describes with such uncanny accuracy. Strange to say, there were hairs in the center of the palm. The nails were long and fine and cut to a sharp point. As the Count leaned over to me and his hands touched me, I could not repress a shudder. Count Dracula's lifestyle, although quiet and uncomplicated, borders on the bizarre. Dracula's residence is always a remote castle, surrounded by a forest and an eerie twilight atmosphere that prevails day and night. He lives on the borders of society, using his social skills mainly as a hunting ground to quench his thirst for blood. Dracula's peculiar daytime resting place is a coffin, lined with the finest silk, usually found in the bowels of his castle. His coffin requires a place of absolute security, for he is at his most vulnerable while inside it.
And a lot of the new legend that's coming through in vampire lore is coming from Anne Rice. The vampires that are very seductive, that are still pretty human, that are not these creeping, crawling, dead things. The love, the sex, the drama.
We visited Whitby, a charming, old-fashioned little town where Stoker stayed during his creation of Count Dracula. Stoker cleverly wove into his story legends and features connected with the town. At the top of the east cliff is the ruined abbey. The stark stone arches, etched against the sky, became the extravagant residence for Count Dracula. During his stay in Whitby, Bram Stoker lived at 7 Crescent Avenue. In the novel, Samuel Billington, Count Dracula's lawyer, also lived at 7 Crescent Avenue. 199 steps lead to St. Mary's Parish Church with its old graveyard. It is in this graveyard on a bench where the body of Dracula's first victim was found. Intertwined with the legend of vampires from the Middle Ages and Gothic backdrop of Whitby, Count Dracula became the immortal fascination of many. Within the walls of his castle, horror rules, and behind his bewitching smile, imminent danger lurks. But beneath this cloud of evil, a certain sadness surrounds him, trapped in the body of death with a strange desire for affection. Count Dracula's existence remains an endless and tragic fantasy.
England, with its rich history, has stories enough to keep you on the edge of your seat. That's our show.